Back. The New American Realist, December 16th, 2022. I got returning co-host Brian Norris, retired First Army in the military, in the Army, over 20 years. And we want to cover some Ukraine-Russia story with this guy. I think it's a perfect guest to kind of tell us his insights because he just recently retired. And I also want to hear what is his take on military today, like what is going on with military today. So with all that, I just want to pass the mic to you and and go with that first.
Well, the first one's that last question is a loaded question. There's a lot going on with the military today, the U.S. military today. Today I went to the Air Force Base down in Jacksonville, and when I was pulling through the gate, it was a perfect picture of everything that's wrong with the current state of our force right now. The gate guards, who are supposed to be your first line of security, right? But more importantly than that, in my opinion, they're your first impression of that installation, of the command, the discipline.
Where was this again?
Little Rock Air Force Base.
Little Rock Air Force, okay.
So, and it's Air Force, so, I mean, you got to take it with a grain of salt, right?
Oh, okay.
Knock on my Air Force brothers out there. So we're pulling in, and from 2 or 3 cars back, I can see this chick's eyelashes and her earrings in her hair and all the makeup that she's got caked on from a good distance, about 25 yards away. And then we're getting closer, and I'm the next one to pull up, and her counterpart starts coming out to give her some assistance, right? And this chick looks like she's 10 pounds of potatoes shoved in a 5-pound bag. I mean, she's just sloppy looking to the nth degree. Uniforms unkept, nothing in place, no pride in place. They don't look well at all. And then we go to hand our ID cards in to get on the base, and she was trying to be in uniform but present herself like a supermodel. And she's supposed to be a gate guard, security forces, police officer in the military. It was a perfect
picture
of the current state of affairs. What where we went wrong is many ways, but I'll put it back as allowing the opposite sex to come into combat arms has degraded the force to a level that I don't know if we can recover from. And it's not to say that every woman can't perform the duties, that women aren't capable of doing that stuff. It's not. There's a magic that happens within those regiments when it's all male. They're more comfortable. They can get naked and undress out in the field with one another. They can use the restroom freely outside with one another. You know, young men talk about things that aren't necessarily table manner conversations. When you add a female to that mix, the dynamics change immediately. And the men will be walking on eggshells all the time. They're not going to train as hard as they normally would. You're going to have a lot of male soldiers that's going to get in trouble right off the bat because the female's going to make allegations against them for sexual comments. And maybe they tried to pursue her, maybe they didn't. And then you have that dynamic where some of the male soldiers do try to pursue her and maybe they become successful, where other ones didn't and they become jealous. And so you have even more animosity building in that unit. Unit cohesion breaks down. The degradation of the regiment continues and so on and so forth throughout. It just amplifies problems all across the board. And then you have the added where there's 2 standards. You have the male physical fitness standards and the female physical fitness standards. The same age group performing the same job, if they scored exactly on the physical fitness test, on the female standard, and she just barely passed, the male would fail and be sent home. But it's the same job.
I see.
So it's not fair. In fact, the male soldier could do 30 to 40% better on all of the events and still fail his level, but do 30 to 40% better than the female, and she gets to stay. While he did 30 to 40% better, and he's got to go home.
What was the biggest difference when it comes to training? Because obviously you've been in over 20 years, and you ended up having over 174 soldiers that you were basically in charge of. The drills that you were supposed to be doing with them, was there any changes?
Everything got easier. Everything was degraded. And I take that back to because there was two standards.
And we're talking Army here, correct?
Army here, yes.
Okay.
Everything got degraded. One, the op tempo got crazy with the deployments going down range. You go down range for a year, you come home, reset, refit. Training's not happening the way that it used to happen because you got a real world combat mission that you're getting ready for and very quick turnover rate of time. And that was going on for 20 years. You just didn't have the time to train like you used to. And then when the war started slowing down and training started coming back in effect, we'd already had a culture of we didn't take training seriously because we knew that we were going to get ready to deploy and go down range. So people approach training dramatically different. And discipline had gotten to a point to where it was almost non-existent across all units that we were. So one of my jobs for a few years was observer coach trainer, OCT, where we would go and judge other units on how they performed in an exercise. And no matter how many times a commander would threaten them with UCMJ action or whatever it was concerning cell phones, the soldiers would still bring them. And when you're out training in those environments, one, a cell phone is giving your GPS signal constantly, no matter what. It's also a hindrance because at night, if you could imagine, if you're wearing MBGs, it just amplifies light a lot. So if you pull out a freaking headlamp, which is what a cell phone screen is going to be at night, and you turn it on, and you're standing a couple miles in range with MBGs, bing, it's just a strobe light to your position.
Incredible. What about equipment? I know that there is certain things, of course, you cannot talk about, but what is the equipment eroding over the years, or?
Yeah, we saw a total revamp of the force during the wars. We definitely got some better vehicles. We got some better armament, did get a lot better. Clothing got a lot better. Fit, function, style, things like that. The helmet when I joined was a Vietnam era helmet, and it was ridiculous. Same with the flight vest. So there were improvements in some, but there was degradation on others. Some of the things we got too reliant on equipment and what it can do, like map reading. Soldiers today are 100% reliant on GPS and plugger systems, Garmin's, things of that nature. While those tools are fantastic, what are you going to do when you can't recharge those batteries? Or what are you going to do if signal's out for whatever reason?
Just more spoiled in so many ways.
Exactly.
Right?
And they don't even understand. Major command units don't know how to do map reading anymore. So if they lost GPS capability and they had maps in front of them, a lot of them wouldn't be able to plot the positions of their own forces, let alone the enemy forces, on a real map, which is troublesome.
So overall, equipment looks like it's, like you said, in some areas really good, some not so much. But the way I see it, what you're saying is boots on the ground to kind of segue into this Ukraine-Russian conflict that can lead possibly to World War III. We don't know. The probabilities now are, I believe, I could be wrong, higher than ever. So if it comes to boots on the ground, this doesn't look good for the United States at all.
No, Russia's been doing something for a while to where they do any brigade level and above exercise that they do, brigade level and below that they do the full exercise fully digital, and then they'll reset and do the exact same exercise analog without all the extra computer equipment and all that stuff. So they refer back to FM comms, fully map reading, sand tables, and all that stuff. So that's going to be an edge in their gap and on their side when it comes to being able to maneuver and operate if digital means are gone. If they're gone. If they're gone. But also just the discipline and the combat focus and overall toughness of units. I don't see that in our combat forces anymore. I don't see the capability of dealing with adversity and violence in action. That used to be one of the things that we'd say all the time. When in doubt, violence in action. Take it to them and just keep taking it to them until it's over. You don't stop until someone makes you stop, or you're done. Either way, the way that you react to a close ambush, you turn and run towards it. It's your best chance of survival. If you are faced in a situation where you know you're being ambushed and gunfire is coming at you and you try to run away from it, 100% chance you're probably not going to make it. But if you actually turn and face, we found out in Vietnam and from World War II that if you face the gunfire and charge it, your odds of surviving are increased.
And based on what you're telling me, there is a lot more Russians that would probably have easier way of turning towards the ambush versus today's army.
From what I've seen across the force when I was leaving, I wouldn't be confident that a bunch of them would turn and run towards gunfire.
I see. So to segue into overall Ukraine, Russia conflict, Russia invading Ukraine, give us briefly, what is your overall outlook? What do you see? Why is this happening, and what can come out of it?
This is happening for a lot of reasons that go back centuries. So between Moscow and Berlin is a 300-mile wide flat terrain from capital to capital with no major terrain features. That's historically been a problem, and that's why they created buffer countries in between the two to try to soften between the countries. So you've had that going for a long time. There's been a lot of animosity, the fuel, the cultural, the communism and all that stuff is increased that divide. But now the tables have kind of flipped a little bit. Russia is a Christian nation now. They're very pro-religion. They say whatever you want to say about it, but it's a big part of what they are. And they've gotten their cultural identity back since the fall of communism. They are more in tune with who they are as a people, as a culture. And they're a people that's relearning who they were, right? And they know what it was like to not have that, and they don't want to go without it. What sparked a big problem is Crimea and Eastern Ukraine, they were doing the same thing, but all of a sudden the wokeism started coming from the European Union and Western culture, and they were just getting their religion back. They were just getting all of these things back, and now the woke culture was telling them it was bad. They can't do it. They can't X, Y, and Z, and they're saying, well, we identify more with Russia, with what they're doing. And then in the Donbass region and in Crimea, you actually had a lot of murders happen of Russian ethnic people, to the tens of thousands.
What is the percentage approximately of Russians in Donbass area? I've listened read some books, listened to some videos about it, but what do you think?
I don't know the full percentage off the top of my head, but I know it's significant.
Yeah, it was high, what I found.
It was extremely high,
yeah.
But the numbers have been reduced over the last decade because of the genocide of those people from Ukraine. Putin warned that if this continued, he would step in and do something. So in 2014, he did in Ukraine. And he pulled off, arguably, one of the most successful military operations in my lifetime, and maybe a couple of generations, maybe since World War II. So Putin and Russia were able to get everything that they wanted without losing really anything at all.
Back in 2014.
In 2014, when they took Crimea. And there's a lot of things that led to that, and we're still studying that today, that operation and how successful it was. But a lot of people don't realize that at the same time, Eastern Ukraine was also involved in the conflict. Russia sent a couple tank brigades into the eastern part of Ukraine, and some of the Ukrainian trained by the United States tank brigades were sent to the front. And they started digging in positions and getting ready to stop the Russian advance. Then all of a sudden something happened. All at once, every single Russian soldier on that eastern front received a text message. And the text message said, They will find your bodies when the snow melts. And within 30 seconds, they were bombarded with artillery from the Russians, laid waste to them. No one survived that we know of. Russia at that time could have advanced forward, but they didn't. They returned and they kept the peninsula of Crimea and they let it go. As we unpack that, what we learned, and the book Like War, which is right behind me, lays this out in great detail. Russia had spent years infiltrating Ukraine. They infiltrated their telecommunications platforms, their satellite platforms, their news agencies, and they put tracking devices on cell phone towers and all this. So they had been able to figure out even soldiers' cell phones, not civilians. They could delineate and differentiate between civilians and soldiers. So they sent a very strategic message like, hey, we have this capability. We're going to message only the soldiers, and then we're going to pinpoint target them and lay waste to them. And they did.
Interesting. So this is really 100% opposite of what the mainstream media is talking about.
Absolutely. But that was by design. Nobody wants to talk about that or admit that either. Like me and some other people that I'm very good friends with, we were joking that the Z on the vehicles and everything that was made famous when the Russians were invading Ukraine
Back in
last year.
2014?
No, last year.
Just last year.
Just last year. Remember, you had the Z on all the vehicles. We said that. Well, that's Putin's Z squad. That's not even the C team, the D team, the E team. That's the lowest of the low. And he sent 60s equipment, 70s, 80 era equipment in with people from prison that he let out of prison. Was basically like, hey, if you survive, we'll set you free type deal. And the lowest conscripts, units that he didn't really care about. And he sent them into Ukraine. And what we're beginning to learn and figure out is he has begun to understand our weaponry that we gave them, France's weaponry that we gave them, UK, the United Kingdom's weaponry that we gave them, and more importantly, he's learning how to defeat it. There's been some things come out now to where the Russian tanks, the armadas, have adapted this boom arm to them that has this very heavy instrument on the back of it, and we think that's to counter our javelins. We'll see, to be determined. But I can guarantee you now, they think that they've figured something out because Russia has now sent their top-of-the-line tanks to Ukraine. And they wouldn't jeopardize those tanks if they didn't think they could defeat those rounds.
So what you're saying is Russia is totally strategizing this to perfection against Ukraine and basically UN.
There's a general, and I'm not going to say his name, but this general said in 2014, and he said it again in a symposium that I was at in 2018. He said that Vladimir Putin is the greatest military mind of our generation. And I happen to agree with him. If you look at how he's done and what he's done, what he did in Georgia, what he did with the Chechens, what he did in Ukraine, what he did in Crimea, the man is methodical. He thinks far down the road. He really thinks about the second, third order effects of his decisions, and he incorporates those. He's not risk adverse, but he makes a solid plan on risk versus reward, and he capitalizes. And there's not been one thing that Putin has said he's going to do that he hasn't done. From the Chechen rebellion to Georgia to Crimea to now what's going on in Syria, also in Syria, let's not forget that also, but also now in this most recent conflict with Ukraine. And he has warned that if you continue interfering in Ukraine, then I will use nukes, tactical nukes. In this recent, he called out London. He said, I don't need to hit Washington, D.C. London's closer and an easier target, right? And then he moved some of their strategic inter-theater ballistic nuclear missiles to where they can be launched at the ready. So he's positioning himself. He's given the warning. He's given us several warnings about this.
But you said earlier that he has not basically backed down from whatever he said he was going to do.
He follows through.
He did it. He follows through.
He follows. And
so this is pretty serious then.
There's no exit plan for him. You know, where is he going to go if he can't be the president of Russia anymore? He's not going to be able to go and retire in Croatia. He's not going to be able to go and retire in the Bahamas or somewhere in Africa. He has no other option. Winning is his only option. And right now, we're flirting with moving the Patriot missile system to Ukraine, the most advanced air defense weapon system platform available. That is idiotic. We're either going to give them opportunities to learn how to defeat that weapon system, or we're going to put ourselves in a position, because the Ukrainian soldiers, they don't know, it's a highly advanced piece of equipment. And they don't have the training or know-how to operate that system. And it's secret enough to where we're probably not going to just give it to them and let them do it. So that means we're going to have American soldiers behind the trigger of this weapon system. And then what happens if we shoot down a Russian bird with an American weapon system fired by an American soldier? It's no longer a proxy war at that. It's a hot war, full-fledged.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people are really worried about this time.
And he warned, he said that is a non-starter. If you send the Patriot weapon system to Ukraine, I will respond with nukes.
I guess we'll keep an eye on this one and hoping right after holidays that we get to speak to you again.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, we're gonna have a pretty good story to tell everybody when we get back, because you're going to the East Coast and I'm going to the West Coast. And we're driving.
Oh shit!
So we're going to get to see every part. So we'll be able to come back and see now with all these changes and everything. And I plan on taking a bunch of pictures.
Yeah, me too. We'll
the left
definitely
coast.
keep everybody posted. But before we finish, I want you to tell me a quick story on the flag that's right here, that you have a folded flag.
Okay, so this flag comes from back when men were still running things. And this is my very first deployment to Afghanistan.
What year?
This was done in 2004. We had deployed at the end of 2003. And I'm just going to read what the certificate of the flag says. So that all shall know, this flag was flown in the face of the enemy and bears witness to the capture, interrogation, and detention of terrorist forces threatening the freedom of the United States of America and the world. It was flown for 9 hours and 11 minutes on September the 11th, 2004, during Operation Enduring Freedom at Bagram Air Base, Afghanistan. Presented to Brian Norse. This certificate and flag is presented to Brian Norse in recognition of his dedication and sacrifice in the support of the global fight against terrorism. Your support to the United States Armed Forces has helped to keep the freedoms we cherish a reality. And I'm not going to read who it came from, who signed off on it, because we did take prisoners and make them look at this flag for 9 hours and 11 minutes.
This is the exact flag.
That's the flag.
Back there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good to finish on. But before we say goodbye for 2022, I just want to say I know there's going to be a lot of people probably not happy with this video, because it is not. I stand with Ukraine. I don't stand against Ukraine.
That's a good point that you said.
I'm just looking at it as,
if you really stand for Ukraine, why are you not joining? And why are you not going over there and volunteering? They will pay for your flight. At one point in time, they were offering $22,000 a week.
Exactly. So for those that stand
What's your
with
excuse?
Ukraine,
Go stand.
go out there and stand on the battlefield.
Go do it.
And good luck. Because
Yeah.
I also always thought that Putin is not a bad chess player. Again,
No.
This is not.
You don't have to like your
just-
enemy to respect
Exactly.
them. And that's the real problem in this entire situation, is our leaders are failing to respect Vladimir Putin. And they've gone so far down this road that they're so afraid of losing face that they don't want to admit that they were wrong and cut their losses. Well, it's kind of like that poker player that refuses to get up from the table, right? When he's digging a hole and it's just not his night and he just keeps going. And next thing you know, he's got to come home and tell his family, we don't have a car anymore.
It's all gone.
And the house is gone. When we
I
got
hope
3
that's
days to
not
get
the
out.
case, obviously, but it's the way you painted this picture. It's not a pretty picture at
Look
all.
at the reality. Everything that they've told us, the sanctions and everything that they've said that they would do, they haven't come to fruition.
Yep, it backfired. All right. Well, I'm gonna do part 2 on this video, because to get your thoughts on this, to me, it makes a lot of sense, because you were literally on the front lines. You were fresh out of the military, like a year, right? How long it's been?
It'll be a year next month.
Yeah, so not even a year. and you've been in more than 20 years. So this is not some, 22-year-old sitting here with the mask on, dressed in black and looking all tough. This is just what real tough men actually look like. So we'll leave you
Yeah.
off with that, and
Merry Christmas.
Christmas to everyone. Yep. All right, we're out.